to God Nod. Today I have an announcement and a God Nod all in one. If you are new here, I make videos of sharing God Nods of my life. God Nods basically just God moving in my life. God speaking to me, God guiding me, God answering prayers. That's a God Nod. And so I share these things so that people know that God is alive and active and still working in this world. So if you like any and all of that, go ahead and subscribe. My announcement is what I'm doing after graduation. So I go to Mount Mercy right now. I'm graduating in May, whether that be virtually or who knows how that will go down with the coronavirus. But I'm graduating, so what am I going to do after graduation? Well, my big announcement is that I am moving to Florida, way different than Iowa, and I am going to pursue my master's in theology at Ave Maria University. So I wanted to share that with you, but I also wanted to share how God got me there, because it's a complete God nod. It's totally in God's hands. It was totally by God's grace that He got me there and that He led me there. So that is what I want to share with you today. Some of you know that I applied to be a Life Teen Summer Missionary a couple years ago, and I didn't get in. They put me on the wait list. And that was hard for me because I have such a passion and such a desire to be a missionary and to bring souls to Christ. And so whenever I applied to be a summer missionary for Life Teen and I got on the wait list, it was just kind of like, it was like a stab in the heart, like, oh my gosh, they didn't accept me, right? But I knew that even though that was painful, that God had a reason for it. And it was simply because it just wasn't my time. But then when I applied the following year, I got accepted and I did it. And so I went and this past summer I was a Life Teen Summer Missionary in Georgia, and it was so fruitful. I'll link the video above about just the amazing craziness of God's presence that was there and how much He just worked at camp. But I went into that thinking, God's gonna move, God's gonna change some hearts, and little did I know that He was also going to use that as a way to provide me to go to grad school. So here I am at camp, and there are over 200 middle schoolers running around, and each of us summer missionaries, there's 20 of us, we're each assigned a parish, a group of kids, right? And it just so happens that the chaperone, that was a dog, that just scared me. It just so happens that the chaperone that was with my parish, we just started talking, and it was actually during the obstacle course when we are, running around to obstacle to obstacle, covered in mud, just talking. She found out that I played soccer in college and that I'm studying theology, and she also was a soccer player and studying theology, but she was already at Ave Maria University in their grad program. And so as she was describing their soccer team, I just became really interested, and she started to explain that they weren't just a soccer team about winning games. They were also about winning hearts. And so they had this mission to be the most joyful collegiate soccer program in the nation. And not joyful as in like a always happy, temporary happiness kind of joy, but a joy that is deep and personal and so rooted in the Lord. And so that was their mission. And so they had this amazing program oriented towards evangelization and soccer, and it was just so cool. And so she was like, oh my gosh, you should totally transfer. And I'm like, I'm a senior. And she was like, oh my gosh, what are you doing afterwards? Do you want to get your master's? And that's when we just connected, and she basically said she would get me connections with her coach, and that is the start of it all. After talking to her, I just remember almost crying out of joy and just praying to God and thinking, could this be it? Could this be legit? Could this be a way? Is this really God's plan? And I remember calling my parents as soon as I could, to get service. And they were just like, wow, God is moving, right? And so I just had this deep feeling that this was God's calling, that this was the next step in my path. And sure enough, it was. So after I served as a missionary, I reconnected with Sarah, the chaperone of Holy Trinity. Shout out Holy Trinity, love you guys. So I reconnected with Sarah, and she got me connected to the coach, and we just talked, and literally just everything fell into place. It was just such divine providence. Everything fell into place. I applied, I got accepted, I got a huge tuition reimbursement, and then basically for coaching soccer as a grad assistant, it's gonna be close to paying for almost everything else. And so literally God provides. No joke, God provides. You know, it's funny because people, especially when you're graduating, or even if you're close to graduating, or maybe you're in high school and people are like, well, what do you want to do with your life? You know, I feel like, especially in my generation, we're just so tired of this question, right? Because we don't know. Even if we do know, we'll probably change our minds. And so usually, you know, people ask me this question, well, what are you going to do with that? Or what are you going to do? Or whatever. And you know what I reply with is, something good, because God's going to show me the way. I don't know exactly, but God will show me the next step. And that's exactly what he does, right? God doesn't show us the entire road, the entire map. He shows us step by step, and that's how we build our trust with him. And so when you really lean on God and you say, you know, God's going to show me the next step, God's going to provide a way for me, he does. Like, when you really put your trust in him, he does come through. And so God didn't just provide me grad school, but he provided me grad school at one of the top Catholic colleges in the nation. Like, this school is on the Newman Guide. It is literally one of the top Catholic schools. And when God provides, like, he provides good. He is a good father. You know, and sometimes in this life, we can ask the question why a lot. But we must trust in God that there's a reason, and that God has a greater good that he's going to bring out of it. You know, I could have been so butthurt that I didn't get accepted into Life Teen and just saying, like, whatever, I'm mad. You didn't accept me. I could have been mad. But you know what? I applied again because I said, you know what, God, I know God's calling me here, so I'm going to do it again. And God came through, and he just blesses obedience like crazy. You know, there was a reason why I didn't get accepted into the first year I applied. There was a reason why Holy Trinity was assigned to me as a parish. There was a reason why Sarah went. There was a reason why we just happened to be on the mud course together. There was a reason that I've been playing soccer all my life. There's a reason for absolutely every little thing in your life, and God can bring so much good out of every single thing. And sometimes we don't see, well, actually most times we don't see the big picture, right? It's sometimes hard to see what God is doing and the bigger scope of how God is working. But that's where the trust comes in. The trust comes in at that moment. We just gotta trust. Because when we do, God comes through. And sometimes, if we ask for it, God will give us the grace to see what he's up to see what big picture he's working on. I can't even begin to tell you how much of a God knot this is. When I was back in high school, I wanted so badly to go to a Catholic school that was either Franciscan or Benedictine, or just a school that was on the Newman Guide, just like a really solid Catholic university. And God made it clear that it just wasn't my time. God made it so clear that he wanted me to be at Mount Mercy. I'll write a link above about how he made it clear. For that was a whole other God knot on its own. But I just had this ache in my heart for Catholic community. And God knew that desire. But it just wasn't time for me to have that yet. And so God called me to go to Mount Mercy for a reason. You know, it wasn't the school it wasn't my dream school of going to. It wasn't a super Catholic school that was on the Newman Guide. It wasn't that kind of school. I mean, it's a Catholic school, but it's not one that's just thriving on Catholic community, if you know what I'm saying, right? But God called me there to start something. He called me there to start a ministry. He's called me there to evangelize. He called me there to bring people to Christ. And hopefully God has planted seeds through me there. You know, and there's been so much fruit. I mean, being there the last 4 years, it's been so good, and God has blessed me in so many different ways there, and Mount Mercy has been one of the biggest blessings of my life. And I wouldn't have picked it if God didn't call me there. And I truly believe that God has used me there. We have our first Catholic club on campus, so that's amazing. Really just trying to build community there. Anyway, now I'm about to graduate, and I'm moving on to somewhere else. And you know what? There's so much. I just love Mount Mercy so much that there's so much of me that I just want to stay and to continue to love everyone there. But God is calling me somewhere else. And so what I do, I entrust it to the Holy Spirit, and I put Mount Mercy into the Holy Spirit's hands. And I trust that the Holy Spirit will water the seeds that God planted through me, through me just being an instrument at Mount Mercy. God willing, hopefully he used me. You know, and anytime I bring this to prayer with God, and I think about, you know, how God called me to Mount Mercy, and now he's calling me to Ave Maria, I just keep hearing God say to me, Matthew 25:23, when he says, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Because God called me to Mount Mercy, even though I didn't understand why. And I was obedient. And God is finally blessing that. I mean, God has blessed me through it so many times at Mount Mercy, but he knew the desires of my heart. He knew that I wanted to enter a strong Catholic community, and that's exactly what Ave Maria has. And it's just like God is just like, you know what, Casey, you obeyed me, I'm just gonna bless you. And that's just like what I keep hearing is, well done, my good and faithful servant. And gosh, like God is just, he just brings me so much joy. Like when you just surrender and trust in the Lord, like he provides and he just blesses you when you obey him. And guys, it's just amazing. It's just so amazing. Like what I want you to take away from this God nod, these many God nods and this one God nod, is that living in and for Christ is such a joyful life. It is such an adventure. Yeah, there's gonna be pain and there's gonna be suffering, but there's meaning to it, and there's so much joy that comes into trusting and surrendering to the Lord. And so I just want to challenge you guys that whatever you're going through, whether it's you're going through a death, a loss, suffering from a lost job, just being away from people that you love, like whatever it might be going through, whatever you might be going through, I just want you to surrender it to the Lord. Even if you don't understand why, even if you don't understand like what could possibly good come from this, I just want you to surrender it to the Lord and trust that he has a plan, that he is God and that we are not. But even though we are not God, we are so good. And it's okay if it doesn't make sense. When he calls you to something and it doesn't make sense, it's okay. Simply obey like Mary did. Just say yes. Just give your feet out to the Lord. And get ready. Get ready to see how the Lord rocks your world. And on top of that all, I want to challenge you guys to really ask for the grace to hear God's voice in this time. Sometimes with all of this chaos, with people saying things right and left in all of our ears, especially in social media, it can be really hard to hear the Lord's voice. And so please ask for the grace to hear the Lord's voice. Ask for the grace for the Holy Spirit to give you God's peace. Anyway, subscribe, like, comment, share, whatever you got. God bless. Thanks, guys.